Kansas travels to Illinois in a game where the line is Kansas -5.5. This is a good game. Little revenge game potentially for Illinois. Kansas has a healthy Jalen Daniels. They looked good. But Illinois also looked really good. Neither of them played necessarily incredible opponents. Okay. But I do think something has to be said about the way that Luke Altmaier played and the talent that might, like Pat Bryant looked fantastic against Eastern Illinois. Caden Fegan, when they played against Kansas the time before, Caden Fegan was not an integral part of that offense the way that he is now. I think there's a lot of change from really both of these teams, but I think more so Illinois in the last 365 days, where this makes for a really interesting football game. Of course, it's the line is under a touchdown, so you would imagine this being a pretty good game. But yeah, what are you looking for in this game? I know you are incredibly high on Kansas, so I imagine that you're probably going to lay it with them.
Yeah, I've got a future for them to win the Big 12. Now, however, this game doesn't really matter for the Big 12 race, although I do think it builds momentum for this team. And early in the season, you get a healthy Jalen Daniels, healthy Devin Neal, Luke Grimm is back. I mean, they bring a ton of production back. I love Kansas in this game. Now, listen, I took the Illinois over too. Like I feel good about Illinois, what they can do with their schedule, but I just think Kansas brings so many problems that they can just overwhelm you, especially a team. If you put a guy like Luke Altmaier in a spot where he has to make plays, and keep up body blow for body blow with Kansas, that's where I worry because he takes a lot of sacks. He struggles
Mm-hmm.
when he's under pressure as well. If Kansas can just pin his ears back and rush the passer. So I don't know. That's where I could see some concern there run into for Illinois, although it is at home, which is really nice. It is a revenge game, which is really nice. But again, I'm going to go Kansas here. I just think Lance Leipold is really, really good. I think that team is talented. I do not see a ton of weak spots on this football team. And damn it, man. They're really, really good. Now stopping the run, I think could be a problem. I do think, you've got a lot of bodies in the defensive line room for sure, but it's going to be about how many of those guys are ready to stop the run right now. A couple of those young freshmen, I don't think are, but again, yeah, that could be where you run the problem if Illinois can just control the football game, control the pace, and all of a sudden Kansas is playing from behind. That's a different story, but I just think Kansas. I mean, they jumped on Illinois last year. They jumped on him, and Luke Altmaier struggled. I think it's a
Yeah.
much different Altmaier this year, much different running game and team for Illinois. But again, I think Kansas is really, really good. So I'll go Kansas. Plus, last thing I'll say here, both these teams played, I believe, a week from Thursday. So they played on the 29th. So both these teams have about 9 days of rest to get ready for this game, which is nice, I guess, let me get healthy, watch some film, enjoy the weekend before really getting into, week 2 prep. So it's not like there's an advantage either way there, but both teams played on last Thursday.
I like Illinois in this spot.
Okay.
I'll take
Convince me.
Illinois +5.5, and I'll take them to win the football game as well. And I don't feel great about it. But my thought here, I think Illinois improved a lot more than people think. I think even though you lose like an NFL guy on that offensive line, I think they like what they have this year, and you get a really, really nice transfer from New Mexico in J.C. Davis, who is impressed, looked good in the first game. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. In Kansas against Lindenwood, didn't really get off to a hot start, right? And maybe that's because Jeff Grimes is now doing the whole thing over there at offensive coordinator. But they didn't get off to a hot start there. If they don't get off to a hot start against Illinois like they did last year, right, I think Illinois, they would like to kind of squeeze this one out. Maybe shorten the game a little bit. Maybe let Caden Fegan, a guy that Kansas really didn't see last year, let him eat. And I think this defense, I think they feel better about it was a personnel issue in that secondary last year, right? They weren't able to do what they wanted to do. I think they believe that they have some guys here to do what they want to do. Now, Kansas, with Kansas, it doesn't really necessarily matter a whole lot because they are going to scheme guys open and they're going to have theirs. But I I just I just feel good about Illinois in the spot. And Illinois gets them at home too, and I think that's a big deal. So I'm gonna take the 5.5, and I'm also gonna take Illinois to win this football game. Don't feel great about it. And I do like your Kansas to win the Big 12 pick. I really do. And I think the ceiling of Kansas is immense, right? And the reason why I wasn't with you on that train is because a lot of their home games aren't actually home games because they're
Yeah.
playing at Arrowhead, they're playing at Memorial, right? So that's why I wasn't necessarily so high on Kansas, like in terms of a win total perspective. I do think this Kansas football team is really good. I'm just I like this Illinois team, and I want to believe that this Illinois team is good. I'm just like you said, Altmaier, they put him in bad spots. I think Kansas's secondary is really stinking good. Now you lose Jordan Peterson, your defensive backs coach, over to Texas A&M, who was a very integral part in what made that defensive room so special. But you still have the talent there, so you're not worried about the talent. I'm interested to see what goes on in this game, but I'll take Illinois plus the 5.5 and to win the football game. Completely fading you.
Here's what I'll say, my rebuttal to that. So my only concern to Jalen Daniels is he didn't have a single rushing attempt last week. Now,
Yeah,
here's the deal. If you, in an ideal world, I don't want him taking rushing attempts against Lindenwood. I do not. However, that does concern me how concerned they could be and cautious they are about his health. And I'd obviously hate for anything to happen to him because he is so dynamic and so important to this Kansas football team. But again, that's definitely something that concerns me in terms of his health long term. Now, however, last year it didn't matter. He didn't really run the football all that great. It was him using Lawrence Arnold, using Luke Grimm, and it was the combination, the 1-2 punch of Neal and Highshaw, who ran for about 10 yards a carry last year. And now that obviously I don't think that'll replicate again this year because that is really, really impressive. And Neal had some big runs and Highshaw had some big runs, but that's where you can get in trouble if you're Illinois, because I look at the Illinois roster and that defense, and yes, I hear what you're saying about that secondary, but you lose a ton on that interior defensive line. Jerson Newton, Keith Randolph, Denzel Daxton, Sed McConnell, Bryce Barnes, like a lot of guys who played for you multiple years are gone. And you just got to plug in these new guys. And yes, it worked against was it Illinois State they were playing?
Eastern Illinois.
Eastern Illinois, thank you. The Panthers, how can I forget? Jimmy G. But that's where I could see them getting into trouble, especially if you're Kansas who was going on the road and they want to be able to establish a running game and keep Jalen Daniels healthy, not only not taking sacks, but not having to use him in the running game. If you could just hand the ball off to Neal and Highshaw, I think you're in a really, really good spot. I think Kansas could be.
Over 55.5. It's very interesting. I didn't take it, but it's very interesting.
Well, last year it was 57, if I'm doing the math right. So, but also Illinois scored a couple late touchdowns. I think Kansas took the foot off the gas. So it kind of worked out evenly, but I don't know.